Hello and welcome to our round 8 coverage. If this was by any stretch a smaller tournament, you would be seeing the what's known as the winning in stage here. All these guys on 18 points, looking to get that last vital win under their hats, and we're going to be covering Rob Wagner's game against Ian Pirouet.
Two very solid players here. Wags we pretty much know about from he's had a top 32 at GP, very solid performer on the PTQ circuit. Ian Pirouet has a Nationals top 8 to his name and has done very well at PTQ level for quite a long time now, although he will claim that Rob has the Indian sign over him in important matches at PTQs.
So we know anyway what Rob Wagner will be playing, but how soon after seeing the first card from Ian would you be able to put him on a deck there?
I think when he makes Arborelf, you can pretty much put him on Naya. There are some builds of Jund which run Arborelf, but usually they're more Farseek based, hoping to go from 2 to 4, whereas with Naya you're sometimes looking to make cards like Loxodon Smiter on turn 2, and in fact here is Loxodon Smiter on turn 2.
It's pretty much what we call the nut draw for the deck.
Yep, and Rob has decided to Mizium Mortars it away, which is one of his few ways of dealing with a turn 2 Loxodon Smiter.
It's one of the few ways any deck has of dealing with a turn 2 Loxodon Smiter.
Yeah, there's really only Abrupt Decay, Dreadbore and Mizium Mortars which deal with it, instantly.
Due to dat ass.
Yeah, 4/4's pretty big. And here's another signature card from the Naya decks. It's Domri Rade, a card that we hasn't seen a massive amount of play in Standard up to this point, but it's becoming rather popular in this deck.
Well, it's a very creature-heavy deck.
Yep, indeed. In fact, there are some builds of it which are just simply running 32 creatures, 4 bonfires. And obviously Domri is going to be pretty good in that deck, or 29 creature, 3 Domri, 4 bonfire if you want to be pedantic.
So Ian misses on finding a creature the next turn now with Domri?
Pretty much means he's got a land or a bonfire on top of his library.
I guess the one cool thing is you'll never forget to miracle that bonfire if you see it the turn before.
Exactly, yeah.
We've seen quite a few games where people have just rushed a card into their hand.
Yeah, and then you see the reaction, oh god, and it's like, right, that's a miracle you've drawn there, isn't it? Rob making his 5th land there, and Thragtusk. It's a pretty slow draw from Rob, but Jund isn't really designed to come out of the traps quickly.
Well, he kind of got lucky with his matchup, I think, against some of those sort of mono-red decks. He'd have been dead already.
He might have played a little bit differently. You don't know what his hand is at this point.
Well, we know his hand involved no other creatures, else he would have played something.
Yeah, he didn't have a Huntmaster or something like that to play, for sure. Still, Thragtusk is a tough card for a Naya deck to deal with. Generally ends up just beating through it with Boros Reckoner. However, I think main deck it's not going to be often you're going to see Blasphemous Act from the Naya deck, so they'll generally stay away from that card just through being such a creature-based deck. Though you might see it in the odd sideboard.
Ian just keeps ticking up his Domri there.
Yeah, if he ultimates Domri, it's going to be pretty difficult for Rob to win this one.
He's ticked it up 3 times, only hit once so far.
Yep. So it's replaced itself, essentially. And what does Rob have in store here? Bonfire for 1.
Powerful stuff.
Well, it gets rid of the Arborelf and it'll put Domri within dying to Thragtusk range.
Ticks down Domri by 1.
Yep, and now he's within range of that Thragtusk. Now, of course, 4 mana open could mean pretty much anything from this Naya deck. It could mean Restoration Angel, it could mean Advent of the Worm. Some builds
But
run
he
it,
just
not all.
lets Domri go ahead and die there.
Yep. And there's Restoration Angel at end of turn. I guess he figures that he'd rather race at this point rather than exchange his Restoration Angel for a Thragtusk. Just puts Rob on a 3-turn clock. And of course that's assuming that Rob has nothing, which is a pretty big assumption to make at this point, but you can certainly see why that play was made rather than just shoving the Angel in front of the Thragtusk to protect
Well, it's either
Domri.
going to be an Angel or an Advent of the Worm, and Rob could deal with both of them, his Thragtusk being 5-3.
Yep. And Voice of Resurgence from Ian there, and Rob making a good play there by casting the Putrefy in response to the Voice of Resurgence in order to kill the Boros Reckoner.
Now, I've seen a lot of different builds for Ian's deck, some of them running as little as 1 Restoration Angel, all the way up to 4. What's your own personal view on sort of the correct numbers?
In a Naya deck, I wouldn't play any less than 3, to tell you the truth. I think it will depend a little bit on your build. If you're playing an Advent of the Worm-centric build, you know, you're playing 3 or 4 of those, then maybe you might want to back off some on your Restoration Angels. But if you're just running straight-up monsters in order to take maximum advantage of Domri, I really don't see why you wouldn't play 4. Especially if you're playing stuff like Huntmasters as well. It just seems like a really sort of default card to go in the deck. The deck doesn't abuse it as much as other decks do. Sort of the Junk Rights deck tends to get a little bit tends to be a little bit mean with its Restoration Angels by blinking Thragtusk and after sideboard Acidic Slime. But yeah, I think I'd rather max out on Angels unless I was on a very Advent of the Worm centric build.
Helps you in post sideboard as well if you've got stuff like Centaur Healers and what have you.
Yeah,
against
exactly.
aggro decks.
Interesting play that just happened when Ian Mizium Mortars the Olivia that was in play from Rob. Rob shot the Restoration Angel, turning it into a vampire. Now, even though that doesn't have any sort of effect in the immediate term, if Rob does put down another Olivia, that Restoration Angel is already a vampire at that point, so he's saving himself a little bit of future mana there. However, Rob does seem to like making his Thragtusks in this.
And it's a vampire in addition to its other creature types.
Yep, so it's a Vampire Angel. Work that one out if you want to.
So it still can't be blinked by another Restoration Angel.
Correct.
And this deck really did improve a lot from Voice of Resurgence. It gave it a lot more game against the aggro decks.
Very true. I mean, it was already pretty good against sort of the control decks just because its threats are so good. Control decks tend to like to try and 1-for-1 you and then beat you with Sphinx's Revelation.
Just the idea of paying 2 mana and getting 2 Grizzly Bears instead of 1.
Exactly. I mean, it's really a top card against the sort of mono red decks just because it gives you 2 roadblocks. And Aristocrats finds this out very much with a card like Doom Traveller, which can get in the way of a early creature twice if necessary. And those sort of creatures really make life difficult. The sort of utility creatures that replace themselves always make life a little bit difficult for aggro decks. So Ian obviously deciding staying alive is a pretty good thing, decides to put his 2 Voice of Resurgences in front of the Thragtusk and grows them into 3/3 elementals. And there's Huntmaster from Rob.
It's surprising how quickly life does change between these 2 decks.
I mean, you notice Rob's on 11 life. He's gained 12 from his creatures this game, so...
There's certainly lots going on in the matchups.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about Magic now compared to sort of a few years ago is that nowadays that combat is very much a part of the game now. So the mathematics of combat are very much a part of the game, whereas before I've certainly heard people like Mike Flores say, who blocks in standard. Well, nowadays a lot of people block in standard, and didn't used to be as big as it is now. I think that combat mass is now a sort of huge part of the game, especially now that damage doesn't go on the stack.
Nowadays, it's a lot more as well about knowing your role in the matchup.
And
if you've got the slower of the two decks, you're going to be doing a lot more blocking, right?
Correct. I mean, these decks as well can both... You'd say that the Naya deck in this matchup can sort of do both roles with Domri. It prefer to be on the beatdown, but it can just sit back and draw a lot of creatures with Domri. The Jund deck you would assume is going to be the more controlly of the two, though, with its point removal spells and its cards like Olivia.
You don't see Thragtusk in that many aggro decks.
Not really, but how many... there was a time in Standard where pretty much every deck was mid-range. So it was... there was no such thing as an aggro deck. It was just mid-range on mid-range wars, which this matchup pretty much is. It's two very much mid-range decks against each other, but Standard has kind of evolved to the point where we are seeing genuine controlled style decks now, and we're also seeing aggro decks to go along with the mid-range decks.
We're seeing a charm there from Ian.
Selesnya charm, yeah, exiling the Thragtusk. Of course, Rob still gets the beast from it, and they pretty much trade boards there, except for the fact that Rob ends up with two beasts.
It's really one of the sickest aspects about Thragtusk.
Yep. Oh, by the way, another Huntmaster from Rob.
Previously, cards used to say on them that when they hit the graveyard, that's when you got the
guy.
Yeah,
that was one of the major things about Thragtusk, and still is one of the major things about Thragtusk. The fact that when it leaves play rather than when it dies, its effect happens. I don't think you'd have been seeing anywhere near the amount of complaints about Thragtusk if it had been dies, but. The fact that people saw Thragtusk, then looked at Restoration Angel and just went, is this a thing? Apparently it is a thing, and unfortunately things kind of spiraled a bit from there. Domri's going to tick up again. Let's see if Ian can find something. Apparently not. One thing that Domri does allow the Naya deck to do, it can use Boros Reckoner and Restoration Angel very effectively in order to fight its opponent's creatures.
Yes, it's certainly a lovely little trick with the Reckoner.
Yeah.
Just to be able to, really take out anything at all on the other side. Your opponent's got a 10-10, it's dead, because it's going to have 10 damage dealt to it.
Yeah, or the other option, which I heard a lot of Naya players talking about, was I'll put the Reckoner down and just saying to a Thragtusk, fight me. And then the Reckoner kills the Thragtusk in the fight, and then shoots something else for 5 when it dies due to it. Just a really powerful card overall, Boros Reckoner. It just makes combat so hard to do.
But of course, his deck doesn't have anything with Death Touch in, which was the other abusable fight mechanic.
Yes, it was. Saw people using, I believe, the Tracker, the 1/1.
Well, does he have
in previous decks?
Does he have an ooze after sideboarding?
I don't think he has Predator ooze after sideboard, no. But I know that was a combo that has seen some play in Standard for sure. Here comes another 5/5 from Ian. Do have a slight criticism: if you're going to play a deck which has tokens, make sure you actually have the tokens available.
You definitely have to come armed with a lot of tokens, especially if you're playing Lingering Souls.
Yeah, I mean, if
you can have as many as 12 tokens out on the board, potentially.
Potentially. Yeah. And we've seen Sire of Insanity from Rob on this side of the board. I think he's just decided, fine, I'm going to, let's play off the top. And he did manage to get a Thundermaw from Ian Pirouet there, so he's definitely got away with it there.
You can maybe have as many as 4 beasts going if you get your angels going, maybe a couple of worms as well. And if you're representing them all with little pieces of paper or dice.
Yeah. Ian's in a bit of a spot here. The decision he's got here is what he does with Domri, because he can use Domri to potentially draw 2 cards a turn, but he's a little choked on mana, so it's unlikely he's going to be able to play both of them.
Well, you really, in this kind of deck, you're drawing about 0.35 cards on his turn.
So I think that his ploy at this point is probably to bin Domri and fight the Huntmaster.
You don't want to leave a Huntmaster staying around there.
Yeah, otherwise Rob can just... the odds are that Rob could just do nothing next turn. He's got a 1 in... he's got over a 1 in 3 chance of doing nothing on his next turn. Just due to drawing a land. So... With Ian now on 6, that Sire is lethal, so I think we're going to be seeing the Sire trade for a worm. And then it depends what's fallen off the top of Rob's deck. Though this doesn't look like a bad situation for Ian at the moment. 2 5/5s and a resto in play. He's got to feel pretty good. Yeah, Rob's going to attack and basically abyss Ian to get that.
He really does have to attack there.
Yeah, so not attacking there just doesn't work. And another Huntmaster from Rob, bringing up his life gained in this match up to 16.
Huntmasters are pretty big cards in this matchup because
Yeah.
Ian has to deal with them straight away there.
Yeah, puts him up to 9 life now as well. So now Ian no longer has lethal forces on the board either. And if Ian doesn't have a spell here, that Huntmaster's going to flip and then put him on 4, and then all it's going to take is Rob to top deck pretty much anything, and this game 1's going to be over. And it has been a pretty marathon game for the fact we're not seeing any islands on either side of the board. This is a pretty long one. As combat's now probably the slowest part of Magic, rather than before when it was deciding what spells to cast.
You see him just trying to look at all the computations and work out whether there's a way of killing him off.
Mm-hmm. Attack with... If he attacks with everything, Rob just probably puts both wolves in front of the worm token. Rob flips his Huntmaster now, which is really bad news for Ian. And Boy's coming in. So let's see what block Ian makes. Pens are out.
You can always tell someone's adding up in a game of Magic because the pen comes out.
Yep.
Starts tapping on the table.
Yep. And it's worm token in front of the Huntmaster. Oh, Rob's got Abrupt Decay and Trample's going to kill Ian from that.
So, Ian takes lethal trample damage there, and Rob goes 1 game up.